Hi everyone, and welcome to Training Tuesday for Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. This week I'm giving you some training. I had a question recently from one of my Patreon subscribers asking me some specific questions about the arrival of their new snake. The points that I made in my response are things that are good learning points for all of you who are interested in choice-based interactions with your snake. The question I was recently asked was if getting a new snake used to handling, even if you have to use force-based or coercive methods, was important, or if it was better to work on building trust and getting them used to your presence first. Well, absolutely, if you want to be a keeper who optimizes your snake's well-being by opting for choice-based interactions, then you want to avoid any coercive or force-based methods unless there is an emergency. You want to avoid being intrusive, forcing yourself on the animal, forcing interactions, or making the animal do something against their will. If your goal is to build trust with the snake and for the snake to perceive you as safe and even something they are curious about and may find interaction with reinforcing down the road, then you need to listen to what your snake is telling you. Watch their behavior and recognize body language indicating they are experiencing fear, anxiety, or distress, and back off if you are the cause. You cannot force the snake to trust you. You cannot force the snake to like you. You can't force a snake to perceive you as a safe place. And you can't force a snake to find pleasure in being handled by you. They have to come to learn these things on their own based on your behavior towards them. This is what I do when a new snake arrives here. I get them settled into their quarantine or into their permanent habitat, depending on which is appropriate, and then I leave them alone. Any forced handling early on is usually detrimental to the long-term relationship, and so this needs to be avoided unless there's an emergency. I like to let them passively habituate to my presence, and then once they're remaining visible and not showing any signs of fear, anxiety, or distress when I'm nearby, I gradually introduce more active habituation. That is when I start to do activities outside of the enclosure. That's when I start working up to opening the door, and perhaps I even work up to changing water or spot cleaning inside the habitat, as long as the snake is not exhibiting escape and avoidance behavior, defensive behavior, or fear. Approach and retreat based on what the snake is displaying is the best strategy to adhere to when things get to this point. I do start target training or puzzle feeding with the first feed, independent of the general work that I just discussed. Target training is a form of active habituation that you can start immediately. If the snake is eating, they can be training. Once they're targeting and showing an interest in investigating the open door, and eventually coming out on their own or maybe coming out via targeting, then I start to work on introducing touch and eventually handling through gradual desensitization. The process as a whole should ideally start as young as possible, but there is no need to rush into the physical handling part specifically. That will happen as part of the process down the road. The age when the touch training and desensitization to handling starts does not matter as long as you've been doing the hands-off habituation methods and choice-based interactions to establish trust from the beginning. The younger a snake is when they start the entire process, the better, but the specific age they are at during each phase isn't going to impact the end result. I've started snakes as young as 3.5 weeks old and others that have been adults, and it all goes the same or progresses in a similar way for the majority of the snakes. The pace that each snake progresses at is going to vary according to their species, their individual temperament, and their personality. There is no reason to be in a hurry. These snakes are hopefully going to be with you for 20 or 30 years, and the time you take to establish a positive relationship now will make your life together positive in the long run. If an emergency happens, then you do what you must to ensure the safety and health of you and your snake. Just remember that handling because you want to is not an emergency. Cleaning is not an emergency. Showing the snake off to your friends is not an emergency, and even cleaning water is not an emergency. You can easily set a cup of drinking water right inside the door and wait for a more opportune and less stressful time for your snake to clean out their regular dish.